something to say about me. He wasn't kidding when he said he was going to make something up for my intro. I guess to properly introduce myself, my name is Jesse Freeman, developer evangelist at Amazon. If you can't tell from my accent, I'm based from New York. And I put my information up here. I'm going to do this just real quick. I really want to focus talking about Fire TV. Later today, I'm going to be doing the gaming track. So how many people here and want to learn about games? Right? Okay, a good amount. How many people work in enterprise or agency and would rather make games? Yeah, that was me for a very long time. I put my contact information up here. I'm on Twitter. I tweet a lot, sorry. So if you do follow me, apologize. But also my email. If you guys are working on games or you're looking to learn more about games, please send me an email. I travel a lot, so I'm not the most responsive on email, but I do my best, and I'm always looking forward to seeing what people are doing, especially if you're trying to publish to our platform. We're all here to help. That being said, so my focus on the team is primarily on Fire TV, as well as just indie games across the board. And one of the things that's really interesting about Fire TV and what draws me to it is that if you're an Android developer or you're building Android games or apps, it's actually really easy to get it onto our device. And whenever you get a Fire TV, it actually is a dev kit and a retail unit in one. So you don't have to buy a separate retail unit. You can immediately get a retail unit, turn on ADB debugging, and then push your game or app directly to the device. And then mostly what I focus on gaming is that it's also a very powerful gaming system. So we have a really, I'll go over the specs in a little bit, but in addition to having just a dedicated GPU and a really fast processor, we also have game controllers that you can purchase as well to go with the Fire TV. In the States, we actually have a gamer bundle where we sell it with the Fire TV and a game controller. So you could do really impressive gaming with it. Again, I'm not I won't go through specific GPU. I'm not like a hardcore numbers guy, but just at high end, we're onto the second generation of Fire TV right now. So it's about 75% faster than the last generation. So as you can see, we're making strides to make this hardware even more faster and more capable for game developers and for app developers as well. It has 2 gigs of RAM, which is a lot for a device like this, as well as dedicated graphics. And I do a lot of work with game developers, and I've seen them just throw stuff even from console directly on the box and be impressed, like right out the gate, that their stuff runs on it. And as I was saying, we have a huge selection of games, so we're always looking for game developers to bring their games over. But also we support multiple controllers too. So if you're working on multiplayer games or you're working on more console-focused games, Fire TV is a really great home for your games as well. And a big thing is like I said, multiplayer. We were going through a period in gaming where it seems like everyone was making a multiplayer game after watching Towerfall and games like that. It's important to be on a device that if you making a game for more than 2 players is sort of a niche, right? It goes to a more hardcore game audience. But if you are building a game that supports maybe up to 7 people, which is what our device supports, up to 7 controllers, you actually have a home on our device in order to put that game. So and we'll help you promote it as well. So being able to play games not just by yourself, but with others is important for our device. And then the big thing I want to talk about is how many people have ever published to TV before or built a TV-centric device? A few people. It's not that common. Up until devices like this that are Android-powered, set-top boxes and streaming boxes came out, it was very, very difficult to actually get the TV. It's why it sort of drew me to Fire TV as a person who made games before 8-bit was a thing. I always liked the idea of playing my games on the TV, but having a dev kit for a console or something like that was so cost prohibitive, especially as an independent developer. So there's a lot of thought. Now I can just simply, like I said, get the retail unit and throw anything onto it. But you actually have to think a little bit about how do you design for the TV. And the same things that we do in games also apply to apps as well. So I'm going to talk about this 10-foot experience. And the idea behind 10-foot experience is pretty standard, right? It's almost exactly what it sounds like, right? You're not sitting very close to the device. You're sitting very far away from it. So you have to take into consideration UX changes and other things that make it more usable when you're not directly touching the device. So it's a long Wikipedia definition, but for people who like definitions. But long story short, really it's about how do we take UI and we simplify it for somebody who's using the device very far away and also has a limited input. So for Fire TV, every Fire TV ships with a remote, and the remote has up, down, left, right, and center, which is the select button. And you have to take a UI, especially if you're coming from mobile and bringing it over to TV, you have to take a UI that someone's used to just clicking on and convert that into something that can now be used with a controller. And at a high level, it's not that difficult to make that happen, but at a systemic level, you need to make sure that your UI adjusts and fits for this experience. So one of the things you'll notice when you actually boot up a Fire TV and you go through the UI is that we have a very clean and simple, easy to navigate UI. We do a lot with size of icons to have visual hierarchy from the top to the bottom. We also make quick navigation easy, so we highlight what are main categories along the left, what are the things that we're trying to surface to you. So the last thing you want to do when you turn on a Fire TV is try to hunt through what was the last thing I looked at. All your recent apps and everything are always at the top. Then we start suggesting stuff for you as well. And that's a big thing when you're designing for TV, is that don't make people like hunt for actual items in your interface. Surface as much intelligently as you can. The first screen should always be the most important. This is what you want to do right now, and then let them drill down into the information. And again, this all goes back to, while the remote is a really great device, it is also limiting in certain respects, especially if you're a game developer and you're trying to think of, well, how do I make a game that only has up, down, left, right, and center? How do I navigate through an app that uses that as well? So the other things that our remote also has is standard Android buttons. So some things that we help out with navigation is we have back. So if you're building a native Android app, you can leverage the same UI paradigms that you would do on normal Android devices. You can use back. We have a home button that takes you right back to the home screen. In fact, when you're playing games and if you hit home, it actually, before you exit an app or a game, it gives you a message telling you, hey, you're about to leave this. And if it's a game and you tie into our game services, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it'll also show you what your high scores were, achievements, stuff like that, before you exit the game. So we do a little bit of stuff to help the user transition from your app back to the home screen as well. You wouldn't want someone accidentally just hitting home and exiting out of your app. So you don't have to worry about that. The OS does it for you. And then we also have a menu button, which is really good because you can hide the menu options and have contextual menus come up if the user presses the menu button. And then we have dedicated media buttons. And the first thing game developers say is like, well, can I turn the remote sideways and use the media buttons and turn it into like a NES controller? Unfortunately, these are dedicated just for media playback, and we try to keep the experience consistent across all of our apps. So you can't tap into these unless you have video playback in your app. And the same thing go with these. These buttons up here have to be dedicated for the OS actions. So that simply leaves you outside of normal navigation is the up, down, left, right, and center. The good news, though, is that if you're designing a landscape app, especially if you're doing a tablet app, chances are that the UI and the design of it's going to work almost instantly. Most tablets at this point have a high enough resolution that they're matching 1080p or along those lines of that aspect ratio. So there may be very little things that you're going to have to do to change your UI to work on the TV. The biggest ones, though, is stuff like button select states. So my background previously was I did a lot of web development, and it was just taken for granted whenever you're doing something on web or on the computer or anything that requires a mouse, you just had hover, you have select, you have all these button states. Now in mobile, we've lost a lot of these because it's a touch screen. There is no notion of hover really in touch. So those are the things you'd have to go back and think through is, hey, does my UI support hover? Do I support the right interactions to make it intuitive as I'm moving around the UI that you know what you're selected on? Also making sure that the navigation and everything is easily selectable through the remote. And cleanly and clearly making it obvious what do you need to do if you, in order to move from one screen to another, right? If you're hiding a lot of your UI behind menus and stuff like that, you want to make sure that it's intuitive to the user. How do they get to the next screen? Where are they supposed to be going? And that goes back to the stuff I was talking about with visual hierarchy. Important things are big, less important things are small or completely hidden out. And then it's working with HD resolution on TV. So for us, if you're doing native Android development, everything is the XHDPI. So that's just resolution of just 1080p. And the good news is that how many people here love working with multiple millions of resolutions on Android, right? It's always thrilling in that part of your design. Well, we handle all the downscaling for you. So all you have to do is worry about 1080p, and we'll downscale to 720p. And I put 480p on here. Most TVs at this day and age at least do 720p. So if you have an HDMI into a TV, it's usually at that resolution, so you don't have to worry too much about 480p. The one thing I will say, though, is that the new Fire TV supports 4K. And the way that we support 4K is for video playback. So you can stream and play back 4K video. Your UI and everything will still be designed to 1080p. So that's something we do on the chip for video specifically. So as a developer, you don't have to worry about the optimization that comes with having to support a 4K resolution, which is pretty intensive no matter how powerful the device is. Also, if you're building native Android apps, disable rotation. There's no rotation on the Fire TV, right? So don't put it in portrait mode. Make sure that it's set to landscape. You laugh, but these things happen. Happens to me. And then also, one of the things you may want to do, especially if you're doing native Android development, is that you may want to break out your resources and create separate views that are just for TV, right? So try to reuse all your business logic, but your views might need to be customized just for the TV itself. So in that case, just use your normal stuff that you do in Android for supporting different types of form factors, and just build out your own resources folder. The other thing that's new for people who move over to TV that they may not know about is overscaling. So overscaling, overscan, basically in old tube TVs, you had this little area that was danger zone, and anything that was in it would basically get cut off by the tube. HD TVs and stuff like that don't have that bad of it anymore. But even the other day when I was setting up some stuff for Fire TV, I noticed some games had clipping and stuff because they don't take into account. So later today, I'm going to talk about responsive game design, and this is how I build games that go from desktop to mobile back to TV. And in that talk, I'll go into a lot more depth about how to work with overscan. But for the most part, I just take about 10% of the screen's edges out, and then I just say anything inside of that, I basically keep as the safe zone. So anything that's text UI, you have to be very careful to make sure it doesn't go to the edge of the screen, or you might lose it. The other thing that's really important is the color range for your app. Depending on the type of color you use, the type of monitor you use, or LCD TV, you can get some really weird interactions. It's, just basic stuff like don't put blue text on yellow. Not a good idea ever. But things like this, like cooler colors are going to bleed less, and bleeding is when you see on the picture it gets a little fuzzy around each of the pixels and you start losing that definition. So especially when you're sitting far away, you got to be very careful about how you display fonts, because you want your fonts to be clear. So knowing the background color, the way things are going to be set up, and understanding the color range is very, very important. You also want to stay away from the two extremes of colors, right? You don't want to have really bright whites, and you don't want to have really dark blacks, because TVs still can't produce that color range. And then, as I was saying, later on I'm going to talk about this notion of how do we build for different resolutions. But the way that I sort of handle it, and I summarize this slide, at a high level, I don't think about specific resolutions. I think about aspect ratios. So 16:9 and 4:3 are the two main spectrums of aspect ratios we're dealing with in sort of the mobile space, right? So 16:9 is going to be our HD tablets, and it's going to be TV. And then 4:3 is something more like iPad, right? That's more squared off. And if you build for those two aspect ratios, anything in between should look sort of fine. If you take the difference between the aspect ratios into account and also the bleed area and the overscan, your UI should scale pretty cleanly. And then the other thing that's most important to know about all of our devices across the board is that if you can output an APK, we can run it. And you'll notice we had some stats before. I may have taken the slide out, but it's about 75%. We've tested like 75% of the apps just work. The little bit of difference is usually if you're using our in-app purchase services or our map services or any of the other mapping services that we have that are specific to our device. But other than that, we're now supporting at Fire OS 5, we now support Lollipop. So, and this is especially important on Fire TV because now you can use stuff like the lean back library and some of the other stuff that's on Android TV and bring your apps and games over a little bit easier. We also have built-in game services as well. So if you're doing leaderboards, high scores, achievements, even cloud syncing between devices, all of our devices have Game Circle built in, and Game Circle is an API that we make available to all game developers. And this is really great, especially the cloud syncing, because you can actually sync the game. So, and I talk about this a little bit in my responsive game design talk. Don't penalize your users if they like to buy your app over and over again, especially on different platforms and different markets. Give them their saved data. Don't lock it to a specific device. It's probably the most important thing that mobile developers need to take into account now. So being able to give them their achievements and everything consistently, and plus this is all built into the UI. So as I was talking about, if you quit a game and you've automatically and you've added this into your app, what will happen is that they'll see their achievements, they'll see their high scores, and as they search through your game on the UI and the home screen, they'll also see the number of achievements they've unlocked too. And this is incredibly important for retention. So we also have a monetization track that's going to talk about how do you get players not only just to play the game, but how do you get them to stay? How do you get them to monetize? How do you convert those into things that actually keep you, financially making more apps and more games, right? So incorporating this stuff, and we make it as easy as possible on our devices, and making this in there is a great retention tool. Also, Ian talked about it a little bit. A lot of people have heard of Amazon. We're sort of a popular brand, especially from people who buy stuff. And because of that, we make it really easy for existing Amazon customers to buy your game or your app or your in-app purchase. If you think about it, anyone who has an Amazon account is already a customer for you. So when they open up a Fire TV, the Fire TV is actually paired to their Amazon account. There's nothing else they need to do. From day one, as soon as they turn on the device, they can actually make a purchase. And we give you guys the tools you need to do in-app purchasing, mobile ads. All these things, again, will be covered in the monetization talk later today. So we want to make sure that not only are you able to find your users, but you're also able to monetize them as well. And then as far as testing, it's very, very easy to test devices. So like I said, all you do is once you have a Fire TV, you simply turn on ADB, and you can connect to it either through USB directly, which is a new feature that we added in the last OS update, or you can do it over Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is kind of important because you want to make sure that not everyone has their Fire TV and TV set up next to their computer where they're doing development, so you can do everything wirelessly. And then from there, you can test that out. So I highly suggest, no matter what you do, make sure you test it out on a physical hardware. No emulator or anything like that is ever going to give you the same experience. In fact, we actually don't have an emulator that's dedicated directly to Fire TV. But one thing that you can do is that if you are confident that your app runs already on TV, you can actually go to our dev portal and drag your APK over onto our website, and we'll test it for you and tell you if anything sticks out. So we'll go through the method calls, we'll go through any of your interactions and purchasing stuff to make sure that you're using the right calls, and we'll tell you immediately whether it would pass or fail just our high-level test. So that's important too if you're doing mobile apps as well. It's the same tester. So if you go to developer.amazon.com, you'll be able to test out your APKs without ever putting it on one of our devices, which I don't suggest. I suggest at least putting it on a device. Saying the option is there. We try to make it as easy as possible for developers. And again, we have lots of online documentation to go through. And as I tell developers, no one here is going to tell you, just publish with us and that's all we want. We actually want you guys to be successful, and success means being everywhere, right? That's one of the things that Amazon does. We're very customer focused, and we want customers to be able to get the stuff that they want wherever they want to get it. That's why we offer such a huge range of products. The one thing I will tell developers is this: I just want to be a checkbox for you guys. If you're outputting an APK or you're already building Android, you're halfway there. So I just want to make sure that the developer experience is as easy as possible for you, because the last thing that we want is for it to be challenging and take a lot of time and a lot of your resources. If we can make our platform as easy as possible to publish to, not only will you like to publish to it, but it'll be an additional platform for you to reach a whole new customer base. So with that, trying to get us just a little bit on time, and I'm going to leave this slide up here. Basically, this is a big QR code. If you guys never seen a QR code before, take the survey. I think Mike was talking earlier that we also look for feedback. I like to joke with people, give me the best one possible, because we don't work on tips. We work on knowing the feedback, and also it's important for us to know what you guys think. and if there's anything we can do to improve the talk. And then coming up next, we're going to have a talk case study specifically on a partner from Fire TV, as well as a 15-minute break. So let's take a little minute as we switch this over, and please everyone fill out the survey. Thank you.